All right, welcome back. Now, you see what this stream is about: history of music. But my reason for covering the history of Black American music is to point out or bring attention to the fact that currently Black Americans are controlled through their music like a population of Frankenstein people. And we should not be controlled or influenced or anything like that. We shouldn't be the subjects of witchcraft, occult practices. We're not guinea pigs. Nobody wants to be controlled. And they're primarily doing it through our music, because music is the most powerful form of culture. It's not simply entertainment. It's the most powerful because it is the most efficient way to tap into the spirit realm, to tap into your spirit that's inside your body. You get people to feel something in their spirit, they're going to consume whatever you're offering to them for the rest of their life. And we shouldn't play games and look at influences through music as something minor, something we don't need to look at as a big deal. Badly mistaken. Now, I do accept Wikipedia's somewhat version of musical history, and I'm going to use it as a backdrop, I guess, for this stream. And I'm going to highlight a bunch of things. Get comfortable. Now, allegedly, after the Civil War, Black Americans began to use instruments from white America, which is not true. We've been making instruments for a very long time. Its origins, Black music, are in musical forms that develop as a result of the enslavement of Black Americans prior to the Civil War. And basically, our music started in the church, primarily the invisible churches. Who knows about, just Google it, invisible churches. That's where our music came from. The more isolated we are, the more likely we are to produce historic, groundbreaking magic. That's just what history has recorded. When Black Americans went into those invisible churches, which were secret churches, where Christianity was somewhat merged with hoodoo, this is where the preachers would speak and say things that they didn't want slave masters to hear. So you know who governed these invisible churches? The men. That's right. Built and governed them. Was the head of them. And that's where the magic. Ain't no black magic coming out of Black America without the men. We've been seeing that from the very beginning. And that's the same way with all groups. It's only in Black America have gender roles been reversed. Not by us, of course, but we have co-signed with it. We'll get more into that later. White slave owners. Oh, one more thing. It has been said that every genre that is born from America has Black roots. You see that? No, it has not been said. That's just a flat out fact. It has been. That's why I don't like Wikipedia. Like it's some type of a rumor Get out of here. This is why I don't like Wikipedia, you bum. And pretty much mainstream, all the mainstream is like this. If it don't come from isolated black Americans, I'm going to have a problem with it in some way. That's just how it is. White slave owners subjected their slaves physically, mentally, and spiritually through brutal and demeaning acts. White Americans considered black Americans separate and unequal for centuries, going to extraordinary lengths to keep them oppressed. Black slaves created distinctive type of music, played an important role in the era of enslavement. Slave songs, commonly known as work songs, were used to combat the hardships of the physical labor. Now we know what the work songs are. Following the Civil War, black Americans employed playing European music in military bands, developed a new style called ragtime that gradually evolved into jazz. Now let me pump the brakes. Ragtime is really seen as very American, extremely American. When you hear ragtime, everybody across the planet thinks of America. The saloon music. It would be played in brothels, in saloons, little juke joints, and everything pretty much came out of ragtime, but ragtime came out of spirituals. It came out of them churches. It went from the black churches, the invisible churches, to the mainstream churches, to spirituals to blues, blues to ragtime. See, blues was too soulful. Ragtime was more acceptable by white America. Okay? There was no singing. It was just a piano or a banjo. Blues and ragtime were developed in the late 1800s. Okay? They keep saying there was a fusion of West Africa vocalizations. Okay. I don't think Africans directly from Africa played a huge role in our music. And I'm saying that strongly based on how our music has sounded. I just don't buy that. We'll get more into that later. But we all know about the call and responses. I want to bring y'all attention though to this era. The early 1900s, which is where we really started to take off. Really after ragtime, after really blues. Let me stop talking crazy. Blues and ragtime. Because ragtime was like mainstream. It was accepted across all of America. And in many cases, blues. Although whites were not as open to admit to be a fan of blues because it was so soulful. That's why they had to make country and say, hey, this is what we like. But we really started to take off, and we've always been the best at producing music. And I mean the best in the world. And that's just what it's been. Hey, y'all been the best at other things. And y'all have not been enslaved. Like what y'all try to throw in our face all the time. So you just got to take the fact that we've always produced the best music in the world. By far. It's not even close. To the point where we've etched our name in history just based on musical accomplishments alone, musical contributions alone. We'll live forever. Y'all might drive us into extinction. What we contributed is going to stay on this planet for thousands of years. Take that. All right, hold that. So spirituals were important because it laid the foundation of rhythm and blues. We need to remember that. When we were out there singing with no instruments, harmonizing, synthesizing, group singing, that laid the foundation for blues, rhythm and blues, for everything, hip hop, everything. And I've said before, songs, modern songs, are still based on how we used to sing during the spirituals. The same format, the same blueprint. One of them is that you start off subtle, you build, then you finish subtle again. We started that. We were so innovative as far as music. Even during slavery, white people would gather just to watch us and hear us sing and perform and dance in crowds. That's how unique of a sound we were producing. It was new, it was groundbreaking. And I'm just talking about the spirituals, the way we conducted them. The harmonizing, the help, the soul. Use your imagination. You've heard it before. 19th century, young people understand when you hear 19th century, they're talking about the 1800s, not the 1900s. I spent a while confused about that. I've known people confused about that. You're talking about the 1800s. You're talking about the 19th century. Well, the first form of entertainment for a white audience was blackface. Something that was degenerate. So understand from the very beginning that the intention was for us to be given a degenerate culture. And I'm saying culture because when you see someone on a big stage, someone whose all attention is on them and they're involved in some type of performance, that's always a ritual. Music, dance, whatever. They are representing culture. And they were saying, hey, a stumbling, bumbling, dumb, fool, idiot, that's what you are, Black Americans. Here, this is the pinnacle of your culture. Blackface and minstrel. The earliest form of entertainment, and it was the first form of like theater entertainment, was the blackface. Just obsessed with us. I'm not letting nobody off the hook for that. It's weird. Black Americans, I'm speaking for Black Americans, we don't get nothing. We don't think it's entertaining at all. Nothing. It's not even interesting to paint ourselves up as white and go around pretending to be white people. Y'all, it managed to seep its way into Hollywood. Was it the girls, white girls or something? But please, Black people was not in control of that. Don't even bring that up. I'm talking about the Black people I grew up with. Black people, the grassroots. Nobody dressing up as no white people for no Halloween, for no nothing. It's weird. We don't get off on pretending to be nobody else. It's just other people who get this weird kick and they got this weird fetish painting themselves like us and pretending to be us. It's not just white America. They're doing it today over there in Asia, all parts of Asia. Very strange stuff. Hey, I'm not offended. I just think it's weird. I understand that many of them are trying to be offensive to Black people. And don't get me wrong, they can get slapped up. But I'm saying I'm personally more creeped out by it than offended. Now, but let's move on. Understand, people, the first Black musical was the Jubilee Singers. They was the first ones to tour in this country, and that was in 1871. Listen to that closely. Slavery ended when? 18 when? 65? 6 years later, we on tour. This is us 6 years after slavery. We all think of that period. Us old Negroes was dirty and dumb and uneducated. No, this was the time we was cutting our literacy rate in half. In half. Black towns was popping up all over the country, being built from scratch. You ain't looking at no former slaves. And I'm sending this to Black America and white America. You was looking at the most productive demographic this country ever seen. Take that. And we was proving it by continuing to build towns from scratch after slavery. We just continue to do what we had been doing during slavery. You dig? That's why they started to form unions. These Negroes are far too skilled. So you created the unions, right? I always want to project us as so primitive. The Negroes are at this point, 6 years after slavery, we was more advanced than most people are today. Please don't get me started. Now check us out. I told y'all, look at them. It was Freemasons, Jubilees, 1870s. It was mandatory that we join their little groups. Freemasons, just like George Washington. You want to rise to prominence, you're going to have influence in this country, you have to join our groups. But back in this day, they didn't make it mandatory for these people, our entertainers who are part of these groups, to spread degeneracy and filth and death. It wasn't mandatory back then. They wasn't trying to all out destroy us back then. That ain't it. Do your own search. Look at them. These brothers was Freemasons. It's Freemasons. And I love where they used to take pictures back then. And look at the eye, look in the faces of the black women. These were different women, brothers. And the men. Look into their eyes. These were different people. These ain't no degenerate booty twerking, even though they had their issues. They had their infidelities and whatnot. But these were entirely different people who had decorum and self-respect, at least in public, knew not to flaunt and stick their chest out about filth and degeneracy. And if you ask me, you can see it in their eyes. All of them. All of them. Yeah. They looked like they was the most constructive and productive people on the planet. That's what I would expect them to look like. Real deep and serious. Ain't no smiling, acting a fool. Everybody serious. Here's more images from the late 1870s. You know another thing about the Jubilees. Take our time with the Jubilees. They are the first touring Black American musicians. Look at the women. Look at the waist on the women. Obesity did not plague us back then, because the brothers was keeping that in check. And there was no reason to become obese. You know what I'm saying? There was less depression. The family structure kept everything in check. The poses. Hey, listen, we need to go back to taking pictures like this. Stop smiling and cheesing all the time. Huh? It's cool every now and then, but I'm digging these. Hey, if we was doing a lot better back when we took pictures like this, we need to start taking pictures like this. We need to resurrect this collective spirit. It's far more productive than the one we got today. Again, look at them and look how confident they are. Ain't an obese black woman here. Look at this woman right here. Up on that dress, her waist is small. This waist is small. All of them. Ain't an obese woman up here. That's how black women look. The butts ain't sticking up in the air, right? Arched up in the air. Your butt cheeks cocked up, your musty butt up in the air. If you would have been behaving like that in these days, they would all get up and walk away and leave you there by yourself. Wouldn't even speak on your filth. Look at what we've turned into. Now, let me not go too deep down that rabbit hole. Here's another one. Again, I dig these types of poses. Look, they under the leadership of the men. Look how the men got the women. Ain't an obese black woman up there. And I'm saying that because they have redone the Jubilees. Shout out to them. Shout out to the modern FBA. Listen, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm happy about stuff like this. But look at the black women now. You ain't seeing them small waists no more. Because they not under black men's leadership. These ain't the fathers. These is the homies, the brothers, Pookie down the street. These women single moms, most of them. Already you see more than 80% of them obese. Okay, we need to associate obesity in black America. That's the result of the fathers being rejected. Fatherhood is demonized and rejected. Scratch that. Black fatherhood is demonized and rejected when you don't have the proof or evidence to demonize it. Historically, it has always been proven to be beneficial, the most beneficial for black Americans. Simple as that. That's why, listen, I don't have to put much energy in making a point. Here's another one where they redid the Jubilee. Isn't that refreshing, at least for the optics? But everybody got a big Kool-Aid smile on their face. You know what I'm saying? So this ain't the same thing. This ain't the same spirit. This people just happy. They just happy. Oh yeah, check this out. Now, speaking of the Jubilees, when they performed, look at who they was performing in front of. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes. See, they may have started out trying to give us minstrel, but then they understood these people are immensely talented and skilled. And what the Jubilees did was started to perform white songs and white musicals. Put their own twist on it, whatever, and make their own stuff. But you see, they're distinguished. And it was the norm for them to be performing in front of all white crowds. These are all white people back here. Oh, history student. Oh, history student. That's just a drawing. This ain't no drawing. This ain't no drawing. Them's the performers. This looked like some type of high-end saloon or something. Early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, maybe late 1800s. All black performers, all white audience. They always been fascinated with our music, our sound, our energy. The problem is they've always wanted to be in control of it and eventually wanted it to always be degenerate. Especially the more control we have over it. We'll get to that. Let me not fast forward just yet. But I think that was interesting. Immediately, and understand, this what you see right here is nothing but a continuation of what was going on the plantation. where they would gather in groups. Just, you think this is the first time these white folk gathered up to listen to black folk be entertained by them? These people are already old. They've been doing this their whole life. Their parents and grandparents was doing this. Entertained by Negroes, singing and dancing. That's part of American culture. Black Americans, as far as music, nobody can touch us. Like, we are the gods of music. Shut up. I don't want to hear nothing. I said again. We're the gods of music. That hurt just to hear it, don't it? We're the gods of music. Other people, the gods of other things. Okay? Some people think Jewish people are the gods of accounting, banking. Who gonna argue with that? And wouldn't you rather be the god of banking and accounting? Oh, yeah. So don't get jealous and butthurt because I say, or we say stuff like that. They don't like to hear us, really gloat about nothing, none of our accomplishments. You ain't gonna get that. You better leave right now. That ain't gonna happen on this channel. I'm dead serious. Compared to everybody else, we're gods of music. Everybody else's modern music is too influenced by our music to even find out what they sounded like before they was influenced by us. Ragtime. Do you know them brothers didn't even know how to read? You look it up. Do your own homework. They didn't even know how to read musical notes. They just played piano by ear and improvised. Look it up. And was the most advanced musicians on the planet by far. That is insane to me. This, again, it's too many of our women who are not inspired by their own history. And that contributes to your insecurities and lack of self-esteem. That all comes, self-esteem, confidence, security or insecurity, that comes from your history. Strictly. Once you cut off from your history, any people cut off from it, you're going to see some insecure people trying to be somebody else. So listen up. And if you're not, if you're not impressed by this history, something's wrong with you. Because there's several people who are not Black American who study more in depth than us, our history. And they're flat out fascinated by it and would love for them to have a history like that. Many of them literally trying to steal it. Many of them is claiming to just take part in inventing one genre that we created. They just let us take rap. We helped invent rap, right? That's pathetic. Even if we were to say, okay, yeah, you helped create rap 50-50, which did not happen. What is that? 50-50 in one out of 50 genres? Good for you. No, it still stands. Black Americans are the gods of music, and I truly don't understand it. It's incredible to me. How did they make time-changing music during oppression? Your creativity is not supposed to flourish when you're stressed. It's supposed to be impaired. It is remarkable how they were so innovative in music under oppression. Truly unbelievable. And the foundation came out of invisible churches. That's when they were in the most duress, because they're hiding. If they get caught, they might even get killed. Invisible churches was dangerous. Slave masters knew nothing about them. And it was preaching something the slave master would not approve of. And that's the foundation of groundbreaking historic music. What kind of music would we produce if we dealt with zero stress and were actually flourishing. Okay, so there is an energy or spirit, talent in Black Americans that's godlike. That's just what it is. Now back to the program. And let's move out of the late 1800s into the early 1900s, where this is the area where ragtime was pretty much at its height, around the 1910s. But understand, Black Americans got involved. See, once white America saw how skilled we were, they started to allow us to study at some of their more prestigious musical, like the Oberlin School of Music. See, after a while, we were not allowed to study in places like that. But when they saw how skilled we were without going to school, without training, they're like, you know what? If they actually go through schooling and apply the advantages they already got, man, we'll make a gazillion dollars off these people. Yeah, let's send them to school. And here's one of the schools that they were not allowed to attend, but eventually were allowed to attend in the early 1900s during the Harlem Renaissance. Actually, before the Harlem Renaissance. So they quickly realized these people got a gift to create music. Now, some things had to be tweaked for white listeners, as they point out here. Black American music was often altered and diluted to be more palatable for white audiences who would not have accepted black performers, leading to genres like swing music. An example of how they basically become a carbon copy of us as performers and our sound. Understand, this is so groundbreaking because, listen, we don't do that. We don't try to become carbon copies of nobody else's native music that they created in their native. That's like us doing that with the villagers, the village people. That, very old, the oldest music y'all got available. People do that with our music. We don't do that with other people's music. So yeah, go and make your own little genre there. Okay, they let us study at these schools. We were involved in opera, whereas before we wasn't allowed to participate in that. But we started to, perform opera and stuff like that. Billboard started making a separate list for Black American music in 1942. Okay, these are the hit records from the Black Americans. By the 1940s, cover versions of African American songs, Black American songs, were commonplace, frequently topping the charts, while the original versions did not reach mainstream. Just stealing. This is where they get white artists take their everything is possible, much as possible as you can from them Negroes. The way they move, the way they sing, and you just do it. Because you ain't got soul. So if you try to do it, it's going to come out in a white way anyway. So just do it. That's what it was. And then they would copy our songs, take our songs. That's what cover versions is. Take our songs, take our moves and all that stuff, the energy of the music, and then it would go mainstream and top the charts, while our music wouldn't go mainstream. See, that's slavery. That was like a pure form of slavery, where what we create and build benefits others most and more than it benefits us. They wasn't even eating much off these songs, but the white performers were. That's just another form of slavery, if you ask me. Now, around the 40s and 50s is when things, I think, started to change, because you had the creation of like rhythm and blues. And understand, rock and roll in its early days was viewed as rhythm and blues. There were people who said that rock and roll is nothing but rhythm and blues. No, we associate rock and roll with white performers, and it eventually became more popular among whites and associated with white Americans, rock and roll. But of course, at one point, we all know it was obviously created by Black Americans. But even when Black Americans created rock and roll, it was not seen as rock and roll. It was seen as rhythm and blues. It was that close and connected. And rhythm and blues came out of jazz, blues. What other genres do you have? So, rock and roll, now you're starting to get into the creation of funk. They mention how, this is the era of Louis Jordan. It's like the musical era right before James Brown. Louis Jordan was one of the people who influenced James Brown. I listened to Louis Jordan. I've played some of his songs in some of my previous videos. And they were rhyming. They were knee deep in rhyming. The Jubilees were rhyming. We all know that. But the 40s and 50s, I feel like, laid the foundation for the 60s. And I consider the 60s to be the strongest year for Black American music. Right? So let's jump to the 60s. I love the 60s. 1959, Barry Gordy founded Motown Records. We already know what happened after that. The Miracles, Marvin Gaye, Martha and the Vandellas, Temptations, The Supremes, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder. Oh yeah, James Brown started getting involved, I think, the late 50s. And then you had funk. Music, I believe, was still pretty much our product. Our music was still pretty much our product. Although these musicians were still required to be Freemasons. They were still, some of them were even required to, participate in occults or join these groups. But it wasn't mandatory that our music was possessive or demonic. 60s and 70s, the funk was really taking off then. There were some other genres in between, here and there, bebop, different stuff like that. And remember, heavy metal, created in the 60s, that came out of blues. Directly. Heavy metal came directly out of blues. Without those riffs, them strong, rough, rugged riffs that came out of blues, you wouldn't have had no heavy metal. Let's get that straight. The OJs, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Earth, Wind and Fire, I feel like this is some of the best music ever. And Stevie Wonder gets constant play on my playlist. Now, the 70s was strong too, and I still feel like our music was still our product, although it started to be infiltrated by Satanism via rock and roll, which it was at that point was no longer a Black American product. Run DMC. Now here comes the occults. Of course, you remember Afrika Bambaataa. He was a member of that. He's a member of the cult. He was into that too. Again, they were still forcing our icons to be Freemasons. Michael Jackson, Freemason, all of them. But it wasn't required that our music be demonic, satanic, destructive, where murdering black people was glorified. That wasn't popping off just yet, not in the 80s. Even though it started, you know, early rap, early hip hop was positive. It was positive. And it slowly began to become degenerate and destructive. In the 80s, I believe is when it started. NWA 1987. Completely created by the Letter Boys for the sole purpose of getting black youth hypnotized by degeneracy, self-destruction, where the ultimate high and badge of honor that you could get is to kill black people. Y'all remember there's a video on my channel about Eazy-E and that song Black Nigga Killer. Black Nigga Killer. Again, compare that to the music we made in the early 1900s, late 1870s, mid 1900s. And it's so corny, that song. Be sure to check that out. It's real short. Black Nigga Killer. See, after the 60s, black Americans became a lot more targeted. Now, I feel like around that time, the decision was made to make our culture degenerate and fuel prison systems. Right? The building of these prison systems, expansions of them, it started to become dependent on criminals. Black Americans, let's infuse it into their lyrics. See, whatever lyrics you have, that's what's hypnotizing you. Lyrics hypnotize and brainwash. If you're a harmless person early in your life, and I force you to listen to some drill killer nigga music for 10 years, you're going to be a whole lot different after that 10 years. It'll be a lot easier for you to kill somebody after that 10 years. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying everybody who listened to that music is going to end up getting involved in what they're rapping and singing about, but I bet you with every one of them, it's easier for them if they were to. They have an easier time doing it. I bet you most of them have had thoughts about it, came close to doing it. You see, I grew up around this time. I was born in 1977. But I could feel that there was outside influences in our music. NWA, for example, glorifying killing other black people. That was just not something that was done. I just don't remember that being done. We didn't get together and glorify killing other people. We was still listening to good, decent music around 1987. NWA really didn't even fit in, if you ask me. You could sort of see the gangster thing flourishing with, LL, but it wasn't that destructive. I think it was still fairly harmless. But still could have been cleaned up some. Did y'all know that there was once a black heavy metal group called Living Colour? I didn't even know that. 1988. All black heavy metal band. And they achieved mainstream success. That's hard to believe, but okay. Let's see them do that today. Right? Like your girl Beyonce trying to dabble in the country music, which came out of blues. Won't be that easy today. But then you slide into drill music, and then it's just an obvious agenda, you know. And at this point, like I said, they redid the Jubilees. But the thing is, with the spirituals, you know, and the invisible churches, jazz and stuff, it was all infused with like spirituals, the earliest form, like in the invisible churches. Those spirituals. Let's go back. Go back. Spirituals in the invisible churches. Do y'all know what that involved? What it depended on? It depended on hoodoo. That is what was going on in those invisible churches. Oh, yes. Hoodoo was popping off in those churches. And there was this woman. It looked like I've almost lost it. Here it is. In these invisible churches, you know, they used to perform the counterclockwise sacred circle dances. Black Americans. These circle dances, you know how they hold hands and go in a circle? Black Americans used to do that in these churches. Oh, yes. Where was I? They used to do that in these churches. What did I do with the doggone thing here? Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. And hoodoo was all about, they used to sing and dance, and it was all about connecting with their ancestors. Now, hear me out now, because this is scary to me. I'm uncomfortable with this. Our music used to be the basis of our music used to be spiritual, because music is spiritual. But we was aware of it back then and made sure that it was in a positive, beneficial way. So we were aware music is spiritual. So we used it just as we always have, 1,000 years, to connect with your ancestry, because that's a source of power. But do y'all know in those churches they found what's called the Congo cosmogram? Y'all know that they found it in the floor of the churches. And I cannot find, this is very upsetting. Y'all know what that is? It's, I guess, comes out of the Congo. In the First Baptist Church of America, it was built in the 1600s. They found one of them in the floor. Man, I've lost the doggone thing. How did I do that? And here it is. Look at it. Look at this. The Yoa, symbol in Bokongo spirituality that depicts the physical world, the spiritual world, the ancestral world. Okay? Look, earth, fire, air, water, conception, birth, maturity, death. Our moments of singing and dancing was all about spiritual. It was all spiritual. But the further back in the black church you go, the more spiritual it becomes. Those of you born around my time, it seemed like extra spiritual. Those southern churches, if you've been to those southern churches back in the 70s, 80s, right? No, if you keep going back in time, it get even deeper. Okay, now you see it, right? Now here it is. Boom. This is the actual one on the floor in that church from the 1860s. I think it was built like 1850 or 1650, 1620, somewhere around there. This is it. Used in like spiritual ceremonies. Now these spirituals is primarily credited to the Gullah Geechee people. They're referred to as Gullah spirituals quite often. And it always involved connecting with your ancestors, right? But what does it involve today? What spirits are they connecting to today? They connecting to demons today. Is that true or not? And I just found out one of them rappers, their nickname was the Demon. Was it King Von? Wasn't King Von nicknamed the Demon? It was one of them. Boy, demon is a commonplace today. You think they would have accepted that back then? You come in an invisible church talking about the demon, yeah, blow a nigga brains out. I'm just pointing out how much we've changed and our basic culture have changed. That's dangerous. And this is coming from outside influences. Again, the most targeted demographic in history, Black Americans. Easy. It's like, leave us alone. Why y'all all up in our mix? How about you just cut our reparations check, our land, and don't bother us. We'll have our own government, take care of ourselves. Don't want your influence. You don't need to be in control of nobody. Be happy being in control of yourself and in control of your own music. And if you want to benefit from any of the music that we created, we're going to have to be the primary beneficiaries, not you. That's what this is about. Not becoming more efficient slaves in the modern era. Young Black men, you know full well y'all mom ain't talking to y'all like this. Which one of you had a single mother sound like history student? Sad. But hey, the internet's here, we using it. Let's evolve. So if you ask me, there's a lot of pressure on us to clean up our music. There's a lot of pressure on us to clean up our music. Black Americans are not thinking, they're not even thinking about their ancestors. When you say the word ancestors to Black people today, Black Americans today, the unconscious Black Americans, they get turned off. They're disgusted. Okay, so how different will your existence be if long ago you sought out relationships with your ancestors, but today disgusted by even the thought of them? Do you think that'll have a negative effect on your existence today? Something to think about. History is a lot more serious, a lot more powerful than people think. The people I'm primarily talking about and talking to is single Black mothers. The bulk of our degeneracy today, no matter you want to face it or not, came out of single Black homes, headed by the mothers. And accompanied with that was a deterioration in health. The prison system scam, we should aside, that was easy to see. I feel like that was easy to see, easy to spot. The way they was forcing these artists to glorify murder. They used to give this excuse that they were just telling their story. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Then you listen to the songs, they're not just telling a story. They're telling you about the dirt they put in, and that dirt is what makes them them. Yeah, what makes me me is that I've killed people and I will kill people in the future. That's the basis of their lyrics and their songs. Straight up. They talk as if they still gangsters today. They ain't trying to send no message. So it's 100%. The purpose is to influence. Degenerative lyrics. And like I said, I know music. Music is, more than anything, it's a source of energy. That's what it's used for. When you listen to music, it's to change your mood, right? I'm talking about everybody. Anybody who walks over to a stereo, turn on some music, you're doing it to uplift your mood. In other words, you're doing it to have a spiritual experience. So you got to be careful about what you're talking about. I'm saying you can get that same needed energy with positive lyrics. Nobody should have to tell you that. Do you really think it's going to benefit your kids for them to recite lyrics glorifying selling drugs and blowing somebody's brain out, going to prison? Going to prison is glorified. It's like seeing that as a badge of honor. And that crop of black men came out of that came after the 70s. Now the culture's turned into, through the music, a glorification of going to prison, killing black people, selling drugs, and being rich by age 21 or die trying. And the mothers out there coaching them and encouraging them into that lifestyle. I mentioned the other day the pressure there is on black boys to be thugs and gangsters, when that is all that the black women around them are obsessed with. Thugs and gangsters, unrealistic lifestyles. You ain't gonna be rich when you 16, 17, 20, 21, 25. Between age 16 and 30, you supposed to be broke. Then let's talk to the young black boys, because y'all's moms ain't talking to you, ain't telling y'all this. You supposed to be broke and struggling, 16 to 30. You not gonna hit your financial stride until you close to 50. You gonna be in your 40s when you making the most money you ever made in your life. This system ain't designed for you to have no wad of money in expensive cars by the time you 24. They're pushing to you an unrealistic lifestyle that if you go after, it's going to wind you up in prison or dead. They totally control our culture and the messages is pushed out into it. And they structure their society based on it. It's time to build more prisons. We just had a meeting and all the rappers that they sign will be gangster rappers. It's time to invest in the prisons, right? How much does it cost the taxpayers for one prisoner? About $30,000? But how much do they benefit off one prisoner? About $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 per year for one prisoner? Our purpose today is the same as it was during slavery. That's the modern slavery. And it's primarily generated and controlled, mediated, governed through the lyrics and the music that your sons are forced to spew if they want to get a record deal. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but y'all not fit to be heads of households in today's era. We're far too under attack by outsiders. No. Female leadership is unacceptable, Black America, period. You can only be a leader amongst other women after the men appoint you to be a leader of the other women. I don't know, never read of any other group being this strategically under attack by an entire government. So this is not a game. Other people push a realistic life to their people. Brad understands that 16, 18, 21, 24, you're broke and in school. Might be doing a little partying, but you're broke and you're in school. Now, they're not all broke. Some people find pretty decent gig while they're in college. You can pull that off. I've always had a car. I had a car when I was like 17. You can save up, get a job at 16. By the time you're 18, you saved up enough to get a car, and you go to college with a car. Probably got you a little savings, and you're doing pretty good. But for the most part, if you're talking about your own income generated legitimately, you're broke. So get out this thinking that you as a young man supposed to have wads of money and balling like these dudes on these videos. Y'all's mom ain't talking to y'all like this. What? Other people have a realistic culture. We need to reinstitute, revive a realistic culture. Understand, though, it was based on the domination of the traditional family structure. If not, it is certain destruction for Black Americans. Our presence is going to end a lot sooner than later. I also want to briefly touch on one other thing. I mean, listen, I'm truly concerned about that. Look, Black Americans scare me. Black Americans are a scary group of people. Some of them literally straight up scare me. And I don't even want to get too close to them. There's a lot of demons in a lot of us. And it really ain't cool. There's some spiritual problems with a lot of us. It really ain't cool. It's scary, crazy stuff. And it's because of what we've been doing. It's our pattern of behavior, historical pattern of behavior. See, we once understood that it mattered how your ancestors behaved, what they got into, what were their practices, what was their culture, what was their rituals. It's important. If you're ignorant of it, you could operate in today's world in a way where you curse yourself. A good way to do that, I would think, is to be all spiritual, have spiritual practices where you're connecting with your ancestors, and then you one generation just stop. You're all about your ancestors and your ancestral spirits, and you're super spiritual, but in a positive way, then you just stop. And then instead, when you start back up, now you're worshiping and praising demons. Okay? That need to be put in check real quick here with Black Americans. And I'll leave it there. Doggone it. Black Americans have sent many of our leaders to the grave, to early graves. Kevin Samuels, I think several years were taken off his life going back and forth with these delusional women. I mean, I'd be here all day talking about the delusion. What a task. I hope I don't drop at an early age. Matter of fact, let me end this stream before I have a heart attack live. Shout out to everybody. I hope y'all join me on the next live stream.